A white female police officer singles out a black man in a heated confrontation, her prejudice driving her to lash out. But in an unexpected twist, the man, calm and composed, retaliates with a strength and precision that leaves her stunned. The balance of power shifts in an instant, exposing hidden truths and sparking a wave of questions. What led to this explosive moment, and how will it all end? Don't miss the full story. Subscribe and like our YouTube channel to uncover the shocking details. Officer Sarah Whitman carried herself with an air of authority, her uniform pristine and movements calculated. Her reputation within the force was a mix of praise for discipline and whispers about her abrasive approach, especially toward people of color. She targeted Elijah Carter, a black man sitting quietly on a bench. Elijah's muscular build and calm presence seemed to challenge Sarah's need to assert control. She approached him with purpose, suspicion framing every action. Sarah questioned Elijah's presence, accusing him of loitering and demanding identification. Elijah responded with calm confidence, meeting her accusations with polite firmness. This only fueled Sarah's frustration. She gestured for him to stand, attempting to assert dominance. Elijah rose deliberately, calculating his every move, aware of the escalating situation. A young woman nearby began recording the interaction, capturing Sarah's escalating aggression. As Sarah accused Elijah of being uncooperative, her hand moved toward her baton. Elijah's military instincts kicked in. He raised his hands in a gesture of calm, but his words carried a warning edge. Sarah, perceiving this as defiance, swung her baton. Elijah deflected it with precision, stepping back to avoid further escalation. The crowd reacted audibly as Elijah's actions revealed his disciplined training. Sarah, momentarily stunned, realized she had underestimated him. Her anger turned to shock, but she pressed forward, unwilling to lose control. Her colleagues arrived, assessing the situation with concern. One officer intervened, urging Sarah to stand down. Reluctantly, she complied, though her frustration and humiliation were evident. Elijah maintained his composure, lowering his hands and reclaiming his book. The crowd began to disperse, but the tension lingered. Elijah's quiet strength stood in stark contrast to Sarah's flustered state. Returning to the precinct, Sarah's anger simmered. She filed a report framing Elijah as aggressive, exaggerating details to justify her actions. Her senior officer, skeptical of her account, chose not to challenge it outright, aware of the complexities it entailed. Elijah reviewed the circulating video at home, grateful for evidence that supported his perspective. Calls of support poured in, and he resolved to pursue justice, contacting a lawyer and preparing to file a formal complaint. Public opinion quickly shifted in his favor as Sarah's actions were scrutinized. The video exposed a pattern in her behavior, bringing her past conduct under examination. The incident set the stage for a larger confrontation, drawing national attention. The dynamics between Elijah's calm resilience and Sarah's unchecked pride created a collision course. The stakes rose as justice and accountability were put to the test, with the community and the world watching closely. The precinct buzzed with tension following the incident at the park. Sarah Whitman's actions had drawn scrutiny, and whispers filled the corridors. Officers avoided direct eye contact with her, their unease palpable. Sarah, however, moved with a veneer of confidence, unwilling to show any sign of weakness. Behind closed doors, she met with her superior, Captain Hale, who had received a flood of complaints and inquiries after the video went viral. Hale's tone was measured but stern, as he expressed concerns over the public backlash and the potential legal implications. Sarah doubled down on her version of events, framing Elijah as a provocateur. Hale, while unconvinced, reluctantly backed her to protect the department's image. Elijah, meanwhile, prepared for the next steps in his pursuit of justice. His lawyer, Angela Brooks, meticulously reviewed the footage, gathering evidence to support his case. Angela's reputation for taking on high-profile cases of police misconduct made her a formidable ally. She reached out to community leaders and civil rights organizations, galvanizing support for Elijah. News outlets amplified the story, and the public's outrage grew. Elijah remained composed but determined, aware of the weight of the battle ahead. Within the precinct, fault lines began to emerge. Younger officers, troubled by Sarah's actions and the department's response, whispered among themselves. Some, like Officer Daniels, expressed quiet doubts about the official narrative. Others, loyal to Sarah, rallied around her, perceiving any dissent as betrayal. The divide deepened as Captain Hale called a mandatory meeting, urging unity and discipline. The meeting only served to highlight the growing tensions, as Daniels and a few others questioned the department's handling of the incident. Hale's thinly veiled warnings silenced dissent, but the unease lingered. Sarah's frustration mounted as she became the target of online criticism and internal skepticism. Her confidence began to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. She confided in a close colleague, Officer Reed, who shared her disdain for the backlash. Reed suggested taking a more aggressive approach, targeting Elijah and Angela to undermine their credibility. Sarah hesitated but ultimately agreed, driven by a mix of fear and pride. Together, they devised a plan to surveil Elijah, seeking any opportunity to discredit him. Angela, aware of the potential for retaliation, warned Elijah to remain vigilant. She advised him to document every encounter and avoid situations that could be manipulated against him. Elijah followed her advice, but the constant vigilance took its toll. He confided in his close friend Marcus, who had also experienced systemic injustice. Marcus's words of encouragement fortified Elijah's resolve, reminding him of the broader significance of their fight. Reed's plan quickly took shape. He orchestrated an anonymous tip, leading to a police stop outside Elijah's residence. The officers involved, loyal to Reed, attempted to escalate the situation, but Elijah's calm demeanor and meticulous documentation thwarted their efforts. Angela used the incident to strengthen their case, exposing the department's harassment tactics. The video of the stop went viral, further tarnishing the department's image and intensifying public support for Elijah. Captain Hale, under mounting pressure, called an emergency meeting with senior staff. The department's public relations team proposed issuing a statement condemning the officers involved in the harassment, but Hale balked at the idea, fearing it would be perceived as an admission of guilt. Instead, he deflected blame onto external agitators, accusing civil rights groups of inflaming tensions. The decision sparked outrage among younger officers, who felt the department's refusal to address accountability was eroding morale. Sarah's composure crumbled further as she faced an internal investigation. Her past conduct, long shielded by the department's culture of silence, came under scrutiny. Anonymous sources leaked documents detailing prior complaints against her, painting a pattern of discriminatory behavior. The revelations fueled calls for her suspension, but Sarah refused to step down, clinging to her authority despite the growing opposition. Elijah, buoyed by the community's support, began to speak publicly about his experience. His measured tone and heartfelt words resonated deeply, shifting the narrative in his favor. Angela coordinated with activists to organize a rally demanding justice and reform. The event drew thousands, their voices a powerful chorus against systemic injustice. Elijah's speech at the rally was a pivotal moment, solidifying his role as a symbol of resilience and resistance. Sarah and Reed watched the rally from a distance, their frustration boiling over. Reed proposed escalating their efforts, suggesting planting evidence to discredit Elijah. Sarah hesitated, aware of the risks, but her pride and desperation clouded her judgment. She reluctantly agreed, setting in motion a plan that would further entangle them in a web of deception. Daniels, troubled by what he had witnessed, began to quietly gather information. He documented instances of misconduct and shared them with a trusted confidant outside the department. His actions were risky, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to remain silent. Daniel's growing unease mirrored that of many within the precinct, as the department's handling of the situation sowed seeds of dissent. The next escalation came when Reed planted a false report accusing Elijah of threatening behavior. The report led to a warrant for Elijah's arrest, sparking outrage within the community. Angela immediately filed a motion to dismiss, citing the fabricated evidence. The courtroom confrontation was tense, as Angela's sharp arguments dismantled the prosecution's case. The judge's decision to dismiss the charges was a significant victory, but it also highlighted the lengths to which the department was willing to go. The fallout from the dismissal deepened the precinct's internal divisions. Hale struggled to maintain control, as more officers began to question the department's tactics. Sarah, increasingly isolated, lashed out at her colleagues, her actions further alienating her from even her staunchest supporters. Reed, sensing the unraveling of their efforts, grew more reckless, his desperation mirroring Sarah's. As the truth continued to emerge, the community's resolve strengthened. Elijah's story became a rallying cry for reform, galvanizing a movement that extended beyond the city. Angela and Elijah prepared for the next phase of their fight, knowing the battle was far from over. The lines were drawn, the players in position, and the stakes higher than ever as the struggle for justice and accountability reached a boiling point. The growing divide within the precinct became impossible to ignore. Officers aligned themselves on either side of the controversy surrounding Sarah Whitman's actions. Those who supported her framed the escalating situation as an attack on law enforcement, while others, disturbed by the evidence against her, questioned the integrity of the department. Captain Hale, increasingly frazzled, called a meeting to restore order, but his attempts to suppress dissent only deepened the rift. Sarah, emboldened by the support of her closest allies, doubled down on her version of events. She portrayed herself as the victim of a politically motivated smear campaign. Reed stood by her side, devising increasingly aggressive strategies to regain control of the narrative. Their efforts became more desperate as public opinion continued to shift in Elijah Carter's favor. Elijah's calm resolve inspired those around him. He worked closely with Angela Brooks to prepare for the legal and public battles ahead. Every move was calculated, from his public statements to his participation in community events. Angela's sharp legal mind ensured that their case remained strong, while Elijah's measured demeanor resonated with a growing audience. Reed escalated their tactics by orchestrating a series of staged incidents. He planted individuals to provoke confrontations at rallies and demonstrations. These incidents were designed to frame Elijah and his supporters as agitators, providing the department with justification to crack down on their activities. The plan worked initially, as carefully edited footage spread online, casting doubt on the movement's legitimacy. Angela countered by leveraging her media connections to release unedited footage, exposing the manipulation behind the staged events. The revelation sparked outrage, further eroding the department's credibility. The community rallied around Elijah, their support growing stronger in the face of adversity. Daniels, quietly documenting misconduct within the precinct, found himself at a crossroads. The pressure to choose a side mounted as both camps became more entrenched. He secretly passed information to Angela, providing her with critical evidence to expose the department's efforts to undermine Elijah's case. Each decision weighed heavily on him, the fear of retaliation a constant presence. Sarah's frustration boiled over during a routine patrol. She confronted a group of demonstrators, her tone laced with hostility. The situation escalated when she attempted to detain a protester without cause. The crowd's outrage was immediate, their chants drowning out her commands. Reed arrived on the scene, his presence inflaming tensions further. The confrontation ended without violence, but the damage to Sarah's reputation was irreparable. Captain Hale faced mounting pressure from city officials to take decisive action. His reluctance to discipline Sarah and her allies only fueled public outrage. Internal investigations began to uncover patterns of misconduct, and the threat of legal action loomed large. Hale's attempts to contain the situation became increasingly ineffective as officers within the precinct leaked information to the press. Elijah's voice grew louder as the movement gained momentum. He spoke at town halls and community meetings, his words a rallying cry for accountability and reform. Angela worked tirelessly to protect him from the department's efforts to discredit him. Together, they built a coalition of activists, legal experts, and community leaders determined to challenge the systemic issues that had allowed Sarah's behavior to go unchecked. Reed, sensing the walls closing in, proposed a final desperate plan to Sarah. He suggested planting evidence directly implicating Elijah in criminal activity. Sarah hesitated, aware of the risks, but her pride and desperation clouded her judgment. She agreed, setting in motion a scheme that would test the limits of their influence and power. Daniels, now fully committed to exposing the corruption within the department, intercepted whispers of the plan. He documented the details and passed them to Angela, warning her of the impending danger. Angela acted swiftly, preparing a preemptive legal strategy to counter the fabricated evidence. Elijah, aware of the stakes, remained steadfast, his composure unshaken. The culmination of the department's efforts came during a high-profile rally. Sarah and Reed orchestrated a raid, using the fabricated evidence as justification. The scene was chaotic, with officers moving in to detain Elijah and several community leaders. Angela arrived on site, her presence a steadying force as she confronted the officers with the legal ramifications of their actions. The crowd, armed with cameras and united in their resolve, documented every moment. The raid's failure was swift and public. Angela presented the evidence of the department's misconduct to the media, exposing the fabricated charges and the lengths Sarah and Reed had gone to discredit Elijah. The fallout was immediate. Sarah and Reed faced internal investigations and public condemnation, their careers hanging by a thread. Captain Hale, unable to withstand the mounting pressure, announced his resignation. The department's leadership underwent a significant overhaul as calls for reform grew louder. Daniels, vindicated by the revelations, stepped forward as a key witness in the investigations that followed. His bravery inspired others within the precinct to speak out, breaking the culture of silence that had protected misconduct for so long. Elijah and Angela emerged as symbols of resilience and justice. Their fight had exposed systemic issues within the department, sparking a movement that extended beyond their city. The community's unity proved stronger than the forces that sought to suppress them, and the path toward accountability and reform had been irrevocably set. The fallout from the failed raid rippled through the precinct and the community with equal force. Sarah Whitman's reputation, already fragile, had been pushed to the breaking point. Her anger simmered beneath the surface as she sat in a closed-door meeting with Captain Hale. Hale's tone was clipped as he laid out the growing list of complaints and public backlash. Sarah's defensiveness only deepened as Hale outlined the internal investigation that would begin immediately. She left the meeting with a renewed sense of determination, unwilling to admit fault. Reed, emboldened by his loyalty to Sarah and frustration with their failures, approached her with a new plan. He proposed a series of anonymous leaks designed to tarnish Elijah Carter's reputation. They would fabricate a history of aggression and paint him as a dangerous figure exploiting public sympathy. Sarah's hesitation was brief, her desperation for control overriding any ethical considerations. They set the plan in motion, carefully crafting a narrative to distribute through unofficial channels. Angela Brooks caught wind of the leaks almost immediately. Her network of contacts flagged the rumors as they began to circulate. Angela, knowing the power of narrative, moved swiftly to counteract the smear campaign. She compiled evidence to refute each claim, working late into the night to ensure Elijah's story remained untarnished. Her sharp responses discredited the fabricated accounts, and her efforts galvanized the community further. Within the precinct, tensions reached a boiling point. Daniels, who had been quietly gathering evidence, found himself under increasing scrutiny. Reed, suspicious of Daniels' unease, began probing for signs of disloyalty. Daniels' resolve wavered as he balanced his fear of exposure with his commitment to doing what was right. The pressure mounted as he overheard Reed planning a covert operation to plant evidence that would incriminate Elijah. Elijah's composure remained steadfast despite the escalating attacks. He leaned on Marcus and Angela for support, their unwavering belief in him reinforcing his determination. The community's protests grew louder, their chants a rallying cry for justice and reform. Elijah's presence at the forefront of the movement became a symbol of resilience, drawing more attention to their cause. Reed's operation unfolded under the cover of night. He and a small group of loyalists broke into a community center where Elijah had been organizing meetings. They planted false evidence, including doctored documents and planted drugs, hoping to cast doubt on Elijah's character. Daniels, aware of the operation, agonized over his next move. The thought of Reed's plan succeeding filled him with dread, but the risks of intervening were enormous. Angela received a tip about the break-in from one of her informants. She immediately alerted Elijah and the community leaders, urging them to document everything. When Elijah arrived at the center the next morning, he found the planted evidence and calmly began recording. Angela arrived shortly after with a team of trusted activists who meticulously documented the scene. Their swift response neutralized Reed's efforts, turning the incident into further proof of the department's corruption. The media seized on the story, amplifying the voices of the movement and exposing the precinct's tactics. Sarah and Reed's actions became the subject of national debate, their every move scrutinized. Captain Hale, desperate to regain control, called an emergency meeting. His frustration boiled over as he berated his officers for their lack of discretion. The divide within the precinct deepened, with younger officers openly questioning the department's leadership. Daniels, emboldened by the community's resilience, made a decision. He met with Angela in secret, handing over a flash drive containing a trove of incriminating evidence. Angela's shock turned to determination as she realized the magnitude of what Daniels had risked to expose the truth. She immediately began preparing the files for public release, knowing the impact they would have. Sarah and Reed's desperation reached its peak as they realized their grip on the situation was slipping. Reed proposed targeting Angela directly, framing her as the mastermind behind a conspiracy to undermine law enforcement. Sarah, though hesitant, agreed, seeing no other way to regain control. Their plan involved fabricating connections between Angela and criminal organizations, a move designed to discredit her and isolate Elijah. Angela anticipated the attack and preemptively released a statement, accompanied by documents proving her work's legitimacy. The preemptive strike caught Sarah and Reed off guard, further eroding their credibility. The precinct's remaining allies began to distance themselves, unwilling to go down with a sinking ship. The culmination of these events unfolded during a public town hall meeting. Elijah, Angela, and Marcus took the stage, addressing a packed auditorium filled with community members, activists, and reporters. Elijah's words carried the weight of his experiences, his tone measured but resolute. Angela presented the evidence Daniels had provided, her meticulous documentation leaving no room for doubt. The audience erupted in applause, their support resounding. Reed and Sarah, watching from the sidelines, felt the full weight of their defeat. Captain Hale, under immense pressure, announced his resignation the following day. The department began a sweeping internal investigation, leading to the suspension of Sarah, Reed, and several other officers implicated in the corruption. Daniels emerged as a key figure in the investigation, his testimony exposing the inner workings of the precinct's misconduct. The revelation sparked a broader movement, with calls for systemic reform echoing across the nation. Elijah and Angela continued their work, their bond strengthened by their shared fight for justice. The aftermath of the town hall marked a turning point. The community's unity had prevailed, their voices rising above the efforts to silence them. Elijah's journey became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring others to stand against injustice. The battle was far from over, but the tide had unmistakably turned. The fallout from the town hall sent shockwaves through both the precinct and the community. Sarah Whitman's actions and the department's complicity were now exposed, leaving the remaining loyalists scrambling for cover. Reed, refusing to admit defeat, gathered a group of officers still loyal to him. They met in secret, plotting their next move to salvage their reputations and undermine Elijah Carter and Angela Brooks further. Reed's plan centered on exploiting weaknesses in the legal case against Sarah. He proposed creating a narrative that painted Angela as manipulative, using Elijah as a pawn to advance her agenda. The strategy involved fabricating documents and orchestrating false testimonies from individuals willing to cast doubt on Angela's integrity. Sarah, though shaken by her suspension, agreed to support the effort, her desperation for redemption driving her decisions. Within the community, Elijah and Angela worked tirelessly to maintain momentum. Elijah's public appearances drew larger crowds, each speech reinforcing the movement's unity and resolve. Behind the scenes, Angela sifted through the files Daniels had provided, uncovering more layers of corruption. Her focus sharpened as she prepared a comprehensive exposé detailing the department's systemic failures. Daniels, now fully committed to exposing the truth, faced increased pressure from within the precinct. His former colleagues regarded him with suspicion, and Reed's allies began spreading rumors to discredit him. Daniels remained steadfast, knowing the importance of his role in dismantling the culture of silence that had protected misconduct for so long. Reed's plan took shape as he recruited a local reporter known for sensationalism. The reporter's article portrayed Angela as a manipulative figure, twisting facts and presenting half-truths to undermine her credibility. The smear campaign gained traction among certain circles, but Angela's supporters rallied to her defense, flooding social media with counter-narratives and evidence refuting the claims. Elijah, aware of the campaign against Angela, addressed the issue directly in his next public appearance. His words were measured but firm as he condemned the tactics used to discredit their fight for justice. The crowd's reaction was immediate, their support for Angela unwavering. Elijah's calm authority further solidified his role as a leader in the movement. Reed, frustrated by the failure of the smear campaign, escalated his efforts. He devised a plan to stage an altercation at one of Elijah's rallies, using undercover officers to incite chaos and frame the movement as violent. The operation was executed with precision, but the community's vigilance thwarted the attempt. Videos captured by attendees exposed the staged nature of the incident, further discrediting Reed and his allies. Sarah, watching from the sidelines, began to question Reed's increasingly reckless tactics. Her own legal battles consumed much of her energy, and the realization that her career was likely over weighed heavily on her. Despite her lingering pride, doubt crept into her thoughts as the community's strength became undeniable. Angela's exposé was finally released, a detailed account of the department's corruption and the steps taken to cover it up. The report was picked up by national media, amplifying its impact. The revelation sparked widespread outrage, putting immense pressure on city officials to act. Investigations were launched, and several officers implicated in Angela's report were placed on administrative leave. Reed's desperation grew as the walls closed in. He orchestrated one final plan to silence Angela and Elijah, targeting them directly with threats and intimidation. Daniels, aware of the plot through his remaining contacts, alerted Angela and Elijah. The warning allowed them to take precautions, but the attempt only strengthened their resolve to see the fight through to the end. The community's resilience became a force Reed could no longer counter. Protests swelled, drawing support from neighboring cities and national organizations. The precinct's leadership, unable to ignore the mounting pressure, announced sweeping reforms and the resignation of several senior officers. Reed's allies began to abandon him, their loyalty giving way to self-preservation. Sarah, facing the reality of her actions, sought a private meeting with Angela. The conversation was tense, filled with unspoken resentment and regret. Sarah's attempts to justify her behavior were met with Angela's unwavering resolve. Angela's words, calm but cutting, left no room for denial. Sarah left the meeting visibly shaken, the weight of her choices finally settling in. The movement's momentum reached its peak as Elijah, Angela, and Daniel stood together at a rally marking a year since the initial incident. Their speeches were a powerful reminder of how far they had come and how much work remained. The crowd's energy was electric, a testament to the unity and strength that had carried them through countless challenges. Reed, now isolated and facing multiple investigations, resigned from the force. His departure marked the end of an era defined by corruption and abuse. Sarah, though no longer an officer, began a journey of reflection and accountability, seeking to understand the harm she had caused. Elijah and Angela's fight continued, their efforts expanding beyond the city to advocate for broader systemic change. Daniels, having regained a sense of purpose, remained a key ally, using his experiences to support ongoing reform efforts. The community's victory was a testament to their resilience, proving that even in the face of immense adversity, justice could prevail. The final stages of the battle for justice unfolded with relentless intensity. Sarah Whitman's admission during the investigation sent shockwaves through the precinct and the city. Her words, though measured, revealed the depth of corruption and misconduct that had plagued the department for years. The media coverage of her testimony only fueled public outrage, with demands for accountability growing louder. Reed's failed plot and Sarah's revelations left the loyalists within the precinct scrambling to protect themselves. Some officers attempted to distance themselves from the scandal, while others doubled down on their defiance, refusing to cooperate with the ongoing investigations. The divide within the department widened, with reform-minded officers stepping forward to expose further wrongdoing. Daniels, now seen as a beacon of integrity, became a critical ally for the investigators, his testimony dismantling the remaining defenses of those who sought to maintain the status quo. Angela Brooks worked tirelessly to ensure the momentum of the movement did not waver. She coordinated with legal teams, advocacy groups, and community leaders to push for systemic reforms. Her focus extended beyond the precinct, targeting policies and practices that had allowed such corruption to thrive. Elijah Carter remained at her side, his quiet determination a source of strength for those around him. His speeches at rallies and meetings carried the weight of lived experience, inspiring others to join the fight. The city's leadership, under immense pressure, announced sweeping reforms aimed at rebuilding trust. A civilian oversight board was established, with representatives from diverse backgrounds tasked with holding the department accountable. Training programs focusing on de-escalation and bias reduction were implemented, though skeptics questioned whether these measures would be enough to address the root causes of the issues. As reforms were set in motion, the personal stakes for Sarah and Reed reached their peak. Reed, facing criminal charges for his role in the fabricated evidence plot, sought a deal with prosecutors. His cooperation revealed even more layers of corruption, implicating high-ranking officials who had long operated with impunity. Reed's willingness to turn on his former allies only deepened the fractures within the precinct, leaving those still loyal to the old guard feeling betrayed. Sarah, now stripped of her authority, faced her own reckoning. Her attempts to reconcile with the harm she had caused were met with mixed reactions. Community members remained skeptical of her intentions, while some saw her admission as a small step toward accountability. Sarah's journey toward redemption was fraught with challenges, but her willingness to testify against her former colleagues earned her a measure of leniency in the eyes of the law. Elijah, Angela, and Daniels continued their work, their focus shifting toward sustaining the movement's impact. The community, now more united than ever, rallied behind their efforts, organizing events and initiatives to promote lasting change. Schools and local organizations began incorporating lessons on social justice and civic engagement, ensuring that the next generation would carry the torch forward. The climax came during a public hearing where the findings of the independent investigation were presented. The evidence Daniels and Angela had collected, coupled with Sarah's testimony, painted an unflinching portrait of a department entrenched in corruption. The hearing was broadcast nationally, the testimonies and revelations gripping viewers across the country. The culmination of the hearing saw several high-ranking officials resign in disgrace, while others faced charges for their roles in perpetuating the misconduct. The movement's victory was marked by a sense of bittersweet triumph. Justice had been served for some, but the scars left by years of systemic injustice remained. Elijah's voice remained a guiding force, urging the community to stay vigilant and continue the fight for equity. Angela's meticulous planning ensured the reforms were monitored and enforced, while Daniels used his experience to advocate for changes in police culture nationwide. As the dust began to settle, the city entered a period of reflection and rebuilding. The reforms enacted were seen as a beacon of hope for other communities facing similar struggles. Elijah, Angela, and Daniels became symbols of resilience, their efforts proving that even in the face of immense adversity, collective action could bring about meaningful change. The battle for justice was far from over, but the foundation had been laid for a better future.